With Toriyama's passing, it seems an appropriate time to go over his impact on myself specifically, and, quite simply, why I love Dragon Ball, at least in relation to the original manga run. Though I have read most of his other major works and appreciate them for what they are, Dragon Ball in specific has struck a chord with me more than the others, even beyond nostalgia, length or popularity, and, to honour the one who made it happen, it's time to go over why. The first instinct any have is to judge what they can see, so what better way to start this than talking about the art? Though my preference tends to be for more realistic and or detailed manga art, Toriyama's style throughout Dragon Ball's whole run has an engaging distinctness to it, difficult to replicate, with it blending rounded, classic cartoon styles with some more angular facial designs, a distinct way of drawing noses, and gradually improved muscle definition of characters from the 23rd Tenkaichi Budokai and onward. Be it the lecherous Kame Sennin having enough range to his softer features to naturally be the wise Muten Roshi when necessary, or the sharp, more angular and colder eyes on 18 than the other female characters, expressing her strength and enigmatic personality well. Toriyama's style succeeds very well in conveying the right force and emotions to resonate with the audience about a character. There's then more designs that come with depth to their elements, such as how the aesthetics during the later stages of the first arc, drawing on Persian and Arabic culture, fits with the journey having brought the Dragon Team west, just like the work that it satirized, Shioshi, or Journey to the West, an element later present in Kami's Shinden, Popo's design, or Piccolo's cape and turban, to convey the link between Central Asia and the divine due to Shioshi. Another would be how the three main DBZ villains' strongest forms, or those with the most cultivated ki and existence, as well as this even extending to those outside of Toriyama's direct creation such as Moro in Super, are the most humanoid that brings to mind the Buddhist ideas of the human body being most suited for enlightenment, or the natural bias in media such as science fiction to make the human form an evolutionary pinnacle. This of course being most relevant in Cell's quest for perfection, and makes his evolution a very consistent pattern. Aside from his second form losing the winds only to get him back later, never really understood that. Speaking of Cell, or at least its first imperfect forms, a lot of Dragon Ball designs have an undeniable cool factor that makes marketing, appreciating them, or inspiring artists very easy. The change in art style over the years also fits the manga's tone, going from primarily a comedy, with some very underrated comedic reactions and plain words at that, to a more serious action-oriented story, and a final arc that was both in equal parts, which has sold very well through the shift in art style, and it coming gradually with each arc, thereby not being made dissonant, with any major shift from one to the other being separated by time skips. It's of course worth mentioning how much the sense of motion plays in Toriyama's art working. Toriyama did an excellent job with both paneling and general sequence to allow for the visual storytelling necessary of a gradually ever more action-oriented story, be it how Goku versus Jichan Gohan's paneling visually carries a lot of momentum in how perspective plays into who is in control, the Saiyan arc's climax's consistent injuries, selling it as a war of attrition, or how Gohan versus Dabra has us infer a lot about their difference in experience and the latter's character, without dialogue beyond the commentary of those watching. Each of Dragon Ball's fights aids its visual storytelling. Commenting on the fights, it's worth going over the power system. Some view it as fairly basic compared to the intricate ones of today. Without going over it too in depth with what else is needed to be said in this video, Dragon Ball's key is simplicity done right, with it drawing on the principles of hand-to-hand combat and chi within the Buddha Taoist philosophies of martial arts, and has more intricacies to it than most consider, through ki being comprised of Genki, life energy, Yuki, courage, and Shoki, right-mindedness, that make a fight or the power-up before it rooted in in a character's mindset. With power-ups, the Cho Shinsui is very much a test of refining and balancing these necessary traits, whereas Rodai Kaioshin's ability was a reward for concentration. As an example of how these elements affect a fight, take Gotenks vs Boo. Both seem to be near enough on the same tier to start with on the second phase, but once shocked at being challenged and sensing another great ki developing, Boo's mind becomes so unbalanced he can't do anything to Gotenks. Simply put, Dragon Ball's ki didn't need to be an over-explained concept when rooted in the cultural framework inherent to Budo, and served its purpose in progressing the narrative both clearly and coherently. With that talk of comparisons, there's then of course the influence Toriyama played in almost all action shonen to be released after Dragon Ball. One thing to mention is that some of the shonen manga tropes it's said to have pioneered had already been done in Rinni Kakero or Kinnikuman, but Dragon Ball stood out for refining many of them. Rinni Kakero's tournament arcs were fairly bland and straightforward in execution compared to Dragon Ball's three major Tenkaichi Budokai, each having their own identity and being perhaps the first to allow the protagonist to lose the major tournament in shonen. The power level system in Kinnikuman can flip-flop in how relevant it is beyond a hype device, and the redemption of some characters could have been better paced, whereas the battle powers in Dragon Ball both hammer in the severity of the situation and convey the difference between the philosophies of the Earthlings and Frieza's army, as well as the redemptions of characters such as Piccolo and especially Vegeta being very gradual. Though Kinnikuman also had methods of reviving deceased characters, the main use of the titular Dragon Balls has a lot more rules to it that make it far less of a quick fix than most with only a rough idea of how they're used for believe. If anything, it's these refinements that caused it to inspire more creators despite not setting the groundwork on tropes such as increasing power scales, tournaments, character redemptions and the like. That's not to say Dragon Ball only refined tropes, as it established many of its own. Toriyama's decision to physically age up his protagonist was something other shonen works tended to avoid for iconography, with even notable time skips only aging up the support characters, or, in the case of direct sequels, passing the torch to another, and this was clearly a game changer, both with the determination he put into his decision, and how physically and mentally changing a protagonist through a time skip has become one of manga's most well-known tropes. It's on that note that I'd bring up a quality that gets drastically overlooked when praising the series, in that it being willing to have so much time pass between arcs allowed for various character relationships to change. Characters would get married or become parents, which even now tends to be relegated to the conclusion of similar modern shonen, and this could explore many facets to long-standing characters, such as the emphasis placed on father-son dynamics in the Cell arc. On the subject of Toriyama going against the grain, an aspect to his writing style that stands out the more one goes through the history of the shonen demographic is how Toriyama considered himself a natural contrarian by wanting to go against both audience expectations and desires. Unlike with modern series that have made the phrase subverting expectations a death sentence to a work's quality though, Toriyama had enough talent to make these natural parts of his story, parodying shoujo characters to be opposite to their original selves, such as the pure spiritual Sanzan becoming the selfish tech-savvy Buruma helped her stand out, and have her gradually becoming less selfish and entitled when grown older, some good character growth. Goku losing the 21st Tenkaichi Budokai primarily to go against what fan polls expected worked excellently in presenting the philosophy of even greater heights, and the decision to bring Goku back in the Buu arc when Toriyama considered Gohan not proactive enough in carrying the story understandable for that, and as a lesson that the talent to defend one's values aren't enough without the mindset to strive ever forward without arrogance. The other notable aspect to Toriyama's writing style is having little long-term plan with where he takes the story beyond the broader idea every now and then. This makes it even more impressive when past events fit together so well that they could be dubbed retroactive foreshadowing, such as Goku's Saiyan identity identity, a surprising talent Toriyama had throughout his active mangaka career. This talent allowed for even new threats without much build-up to slot together naturally into the world, such as the legacy of the Red Ribbon Army remaining a natural source for new conflicts even today, or Boo's emergence making sense to have not been brought up before, with how badly disturbing his cocoon could go, and even adds to the stakes of Earth's fate in prior arcs rather than detract from it. That's not to say this approach worked all the time in the later years, especially with Beerus retroactively removing a lot of stakes from the Boo arc due to Shin not contacting him, but it was quite coherent for classic Toriyama. Of course, it's difficult to not see a link between Toriyama's writing philosophy and Goku's approach to life, but that's something I want to go over a bit later. Speaking of philosophy, an aspect that has allowed my appreciation for Dragon Ball to only strengthen as time goes on is how rooted it is in Taoist and Buddhist philosophies, through how they're ingrained in martial arts, and the series' roots as a shioji parody, that allow you to find more layers to simple ideas. I've talked about quite a few of them in past videos, but as an example, take what many view as no overarching goal to the plot compared to the main goals in something like One Piece's titular treasure. Dragon Ball's overarching narrative of surpassing limits and reaching even greater plateaus is tied very much into the Taoist martial arts philosophies intrinsic to its narrative, with the Buddhist influence having even surpassing the gods not be the end goal. How long the story could go was dependent on how willing Toriyama was to be creative with new ways to expand it. This also makes the ending notes of both the original manga and GT perfect for what they aim to do, the manga monopolising on the never-ending formula of Taoist cultivation, by having things come full circle for Goku, becoming a grandfather and mentor, just like the two who helped mould his character the most, tutoring an even more talented boy embodying his ideals, whereas GT had him essentially reach an enlightened state comparable to most Taoist masters, or how his shioji counterpart attained Buddhahood at the end. On such spiritual notes, how Dragon Ball's world perfectly mixes Eastern and spiritual fantasy, science fiction, and a strong level of humour has always had a lot of charm to it. Be it things such as how Goku's monkey tail and talent that a Taoist would call great enlightenment potential, being perfect setup for the reveal of his alien biology, or the bureaucratic take on the afterlife in Buddhism that Shioji already satirized, leaning in on this even further through the Oni essentially being Japanese salarymen. There's a strong coherency to Toriyama's wacky ideas. Such coherency is found in one of the series' greatest strengths, being its characters, as the lack of some grand end goal beyond ki cultivation makes it very much a character-driven story, in which the cast bounce off each other very well, and Toriyama is very realistic in how he chooses to write them, be it how character flaws avoid a quick resolution, characters reflecting aspects of each other, or how many have their relevance or lack thereof make sense. One, if not the best story arc for displaying this, would be the Cell arc. The Dragon Team not taking the logical quick route with Gero due to Vegeta's threats coupled with Tenshinhan's personal Budo, as well as Goku and Kuririn's points to avoid things getting heated, display the different perspectives characters can have on the same opinion. Future Trunks' reactions to similar events when returning helps display a more critical lens on characters the audience may have over-idolized. Cell acts as a way of reflecting the flaws of the main cast even further, and all this makes the logical route being having Gohan take the spotlight when removed from the failures that brought Cell there, while having enough natural talent from his biological factors, some spiritual ties in both he and Cell taking inspirations from Shioji's Sanzan, and some of that retroactive foreshadowing I mentioned before, whereas the likes of Yamcha taking the back seat make more sense from the gap that had formed between he and the Saiyans, compared to if he got buffed in a forced rushed manner as many other shonen can do when wanting to make a side character relevant, for no more than giving them a win. Even Gohan's relevance fading in the Boo arc adds to this point, in it being through Toriyama understanding his attitude towards fighting when not necessary having not pulled a natural 180. There's also of course how each character grows throughout the series. There can be more static and rounded characterization with subtle changes, such as Goku's core personality remaining remaining unchanged, while things such as his ease in taking lives changing after being taught by Popo, or events in the Cell and Boo arcs giving him more to think about in terms of his desire to be the one to overcome the main opposition, compared to Piccolo and Vegeta having very few of their core traits during their introduction remain by the end of the manga. Even some less important characters or what reaction they have play a critical domino effect for the series, as those who have seen my What If videos will know. For instance, remove 19 being there to drain some of Vegeta's ki, and you'd have Vegeta having no need to bluff against Gero, no finding the lab, and a lot of the Cell arc going completely differently. It's through his care towards characters that so many of them resonate with others for different reasons, be they surface level or deep. Be it the common opinion of admiring Vegeta's determination, struggles with self-worth, and ability to turn away from his past self, Piccolo's existential conflict with purpose for his creation, and later sense of self when Namekian fusion becomes a thing, Gohan showcasing the value for all life, and being a cautionary tale on the need for balance, Short King Kuririn being a reminder to not get blackpilled, or even someone as insignificant in power as Mr. Satan, becoming the linchpin in taming and defeating Boo, through his efforts and using his trickery positively. There are a lot of reasons for fans to connect with these characters. For a personal example of reasons one can connect to a character, I rewatched the original Dragon Ball anime with my grandfather a little over a year before he passed away. His favourite character was Muten Roshi, who he admired as being an old man still so active, competent, and full of his own wisdom, despite his idiosyncrasies and not being as strong as in his youth, which meant a lot to a man whose memory was not what it once was, and who was physically deteriorating. One character worth focusing on most is of course Son Goku, as going over the similarities between he and Toriyama bring this all together. Toriyama had a very simplistic view on what his goal of Dragon Ball was, through wanting it to simply be entertaining, which, if one were to take that at face value, would assume he's saying there's not much to Dragon Ball in terms of substance. Obviously, the vast positive impact it's had on many, and all I've said thus far, would contest this. But I don't disagree with Toriyama's take, as it's quite similar to Son Goku's own pure-hearted mindset to Budo, as both influenced the many to interact with them, in their simple goals with pure intentions and no desire for this change, wherein much can be read into the effect Goku's straightforward Budo has in terms of his psychology, ethics, or wisdom, in what's very much a microcosm of Toriyama's approach to manga, to which I describe both as simplicity with depth. It's through this reason beyond all others that I'd view Dragon Ball as Toriyama's magnum opus, through being the creative melting pot of his core philosophies as a writer and person, that resonated deeply with many, be it in artistic endeavours, general fitness, writing and analysis, or martial artists. It's on that note that I'd like to end this video, despite there being so much more I could say. Thank you for watching through it, and most of all, thank you, Toriyama-sensei, for bettering the lives of millions.